But now, David, it's up to you. Yes, voglio presentarvi appunto David Whieable di Forrester Research, che ci porterà la sua visione della evoluzione della specie. Grazie.
Thank you. So, today I'm going to talk about the evolution of service transition. Now, some people might say, why service transition in particular? Well, often the service transition is seen as the bottleneck by the business. It's the thing that slows down business. But equally, if it's done wrong, it's the result of business outage. So it acts as both ways. We want to be safe, but we want to move faster. In the past, service transition has also been sort of the undefined area within inside ITIL. In ITIL version 1, it was software control and distribution. They forgot about the hardware. How do you actually roll out infrastructure? Oh yeah, we forgot that. ITIL version 2, let's put in release management. Still didn't really help define it too clearly. At last now, with the introduction of V3 and the service lifecycle, we understand there is this step where we go from design, build, transition, and into production. However, it's still not clear, and there's lots of different things going on. So I find this a great topic to try and bring different themes together and different ideas. So to start with, let's actually just do a quick recap. What are the important principles of service transition? The most important one for the business is to support the rate of change required by the business. To get services out there to support the business without any negative impact or any disasters in terms of, so without any negative impact in terms of the business itself. The other part about this is a lot of service transition is not about the process or the technology. A lot of it is actually about the people and understanding how the people fit into that pattern. So how is service transition done? Well, changes are packaged into releases. Releases are tested before deployment. Changes are reviewed and authorized at each stage. And that's all done with CABs, with change and release windows, and things like service asset and configuration management, and definitive media library and baselines. So there's lots of technology and lots of concepts in there. But really, if you look at the diagram within the ITIL books, it's a huge page with lots of interactions and things going on. But to actually bring it down to the key 4 points, it's about release and deployment planning, release, build and test, deployment, review and close, we're all done. Making sure it's authorized, governed at each stage, and that the configuration management system actually records all the information and you actually know what has gone on. So that's the background. Now let's actually talk about some more of the interesting things. So what the business is saying is we need to go faster. We can't go slower anymore. The business environment is changing so fast that we actually need to develop quicker, deploy quicker, and we need to go to market quicker. Everything needs to happen quicker. If you don't, you get left behind. Some other competitor comes in and takes that business away from you. And that's particularly in sort of the technology services area that becomes more and more important. So, because of that, people are looking at agile methodologies now. So I will say in context for this, this is my overview of agile. I'm not actually talking about any particular agile method. There are many out there with many different flavors and many different advocates. So, but why would you consider agile? Well, the main one, as I said, is to go faster, to improve IT processes, to improve development processes, or as a way of actually engaging stakeholders. To me, one of the key things about agile is the fact that people have got tired of the old approach where there was a disconnect between the business through development through to delivery. In the old waterfall model, the business requirements were gathered, they would disappear into this group, 6 to 12 months later, out would come a product, and then they'll say, that's not what I wanted, or it will take too long and miss the market opportunity. So one of the realizations of agile is actually perhaps the business doesn't always know what it wants at the start. So there's no point gathering all the requirements right at the beginning of the project because you have to change them. So Agile is about quick cycles, about quick developments, and actually keeping the business involved through the life cycle. So as you do the deployments, you actually get their feedback at each stage and can adjust the direction as necessary. So a typical Agile development may look like this. Number of sprints, quick drops of functionality, testing all the way, business involvement all the way, and then through there. Not a long monolithic life cycle. Now, one of the key things, though, is that testing now becomes key. So we're getting back into some of the service transition elements. And why does Agile impact service transition? You'll see here you must unit test, obviously, every step. But you must also do the functional and non-functional testing with the business at each step, really early on. Integration must go on and be done continuously through the life cycle. It's not the last step you do. So you're doing a lot of activities and a lot of things in parallel. Now, unfortunately, I often see people use Agile as an excuse for chaos. They think that Agile means, okay, we don't know what we're doing, so we'll just do everything and we'll just put everything up on charts, tear down charts, put all the things in, do a sprint, lots of functionality. Agile done properly is actually very, very process strong. You have to have the process, you have to have the approach to actually bring things together very, very clearly and be very, very strong about it. So if you see people just thinking Agile is a way of getting rid of process, to me, it's absolutely the opposite. Now, given that testing is so important, and I apologize for the color of that slide, the key thing we found in some of the Forrester's research is that actually not much testing actually goes on. So back to that issue about delivering stuff that doesn't work through service transition and causing outages, this is worrying and surprising. If only 58% of developers say they do unit testing, that's the basic level of testing. As we move forward to actually faster deliveries, other testing needs to be there. We're seeing now that failures in basic things hit the news. Obviously, in the States, Obamacare, the web could not take the load that was and the demand that was being put on it. So performance testing, regression testing, automation, these all become key features of moving faster through service transition. The next one, the impact on this, and a slight jump sideways, is actually cloud services. Now, cloud services are here. Whether people want to talk about them in different ways, they're fundamentally an important part of IT going forward. Cloud services now means you can deploy faster. So back to one of my opening comments about the fact that early versions of ITIL forgot about the hardware. Well, actually now in the modern data center, with a software-defined data center approach, private cloud or hybrid cloud or even public cloud, you actually define the hardware setup in software and deploy it as part of the package. So now instead of someone having to go together to wire together the servers for a particular service, you can now rapidly reconfigure, redeploy instances of virtual servers and virtual infrastructure very, very quickly. This means that deployments can occur very quickly. Some people in their methods are doing this live. They are reconfiguring web services daily and deploying new instances of servers, virtual servers in cloud, based on cloud very quickly. So cloud ties in with that agile approach as a technology that is going to drive rapid adoption. So no longer do you have that luxury of saying, well, actually, it's going to take us 3 weeks to build the servers, and then we're going to be able to then install the software. Now you can do that all in one go, defined by software, very, very quickly. But given that, back to the key message of service transition, you still only need to support the rates of change required by the business. There's no point putting a super approach in place if the business does not require you to go that level of complexity. And changes and releases obviously need to be tested before deployment. Now, another key theme within this area is DevOps. So we talked about Agile, we talked about the ability of the infrastructure to move quickly. Well, we still have the old battle of the culture. There is this perceived wall between the developers and the operations team. So DevOps is the movement to actually break down these barriers. So you no longer get the developers throwing something across the wall, and when it doesn't work, they say, oh, that's the operations problem. The operations team gets called out at 3 a.m. and wonders what's going on because they didn't know anything about it. So DevOps is trying to pull the operations people earlier into the development life cycle and push the developers later in the life cycle. So in early life support, the developers are the ones that get the call at 3 a.m. when something's broken and not the ops team. And that sort of teaches them perhaps to be better developers. Now, this implies a couple of things. One is that you actually need to have the operations tools as part of your development environment. So it's no good just having the operations tools in your production environment. You actually need to integrate them into your development process and your build so that the operators can try to see what it's like to manage. Now, several companies have different names for this, but there is different approaches. And as we were sort of discussing last night, DevOps is still something that you get to the point where many people have a different definition at the moment. It is a key topic. But fundamentally, it is a cultural shift. It's a way of actually breaking down silos and bringing people together. So, again from Forrester, one of our reports, we've come up with the 7 habits of effective, highly successful, effective DevOps. So establish common values and awareness across the community. Take an inside-out approach. What does it look like from the customer's perspective, not the internal structures that you have in place? Just because you have separate development teams and ops teams doesn't mean that is meaningful to the customer. You must automate your build, test, and release processes. Automation is key for actually moving this forward. And then standardizing components, standardizing the structures. A service catalog, understanding the structure of how you fit together and having that as a common approach. Systems and service engineering. I always add the service engineering to that because it isn't just about systems anymore. And then put some feedback and feed-forward loops in. So you actually, as you move through the life cycle, you understand why things worked or didn't work, but you also understand how things move forward through the life cycle and not just backwards. And then the last one there is put the developers on the front line. So an interesting slide now about how do you actually do testing in this complex environment. And this is actually when I start sometimes to see people step back and get a bit more worried. First point's fairly straightforward. Automate end-to-end testing. Manual testing is too slow. You must have those continuous integration approaches with automated regression and automated integration testing going on. It is actually no point trying to do that manually. You'll just run into too many bottlenecks. An important one, test the deployment and the backout. It's no good just doing the functional testing and the unit testing. Lots of times people do not test the backout, and then when they have to come and run it, it's too late. They find the backout doesn't work, the production system is down, and they're now trying to piece things together. Now, one thing I do say on this, in sort of this very, very agile, very, very quick approach, backout is becoming less significant. With smaller functionality drops, people are obviously using the fix-forward mentality of, instead of actually trying to recover a state, they just look to the problem and fix with the next release. With the old release cycles occurring every 3 weeks, that was you had to back out. With release cycles potentially occurring twice a day, you can fix forward. Run game days. Get people in and don't treat testing as an activity. Treat it as a game. Have competitions for people, how many bugs people can find, how many issues people can find. Set it up to bring those types of things together. Set it up more as a competition. That gets a lot of things out there. The next point is design anti-fragile solutions. There is a book by Nassim Taleb called Anti-Fragile, which is a great discussion on the concepts of anti-fragile. The problem we have in modern times is we like to optimize everything to a high degree. That tends to make things more fragile, more likely to break. So the idea of anti-fragile is that you cannot predict all the failure times. So instead of making things fragile and just simply resilient, you must make them anti-fragile and adopt approaches that actually build strength into the approach. So Nassim Taleb has this black swan concept, which is the idea of these are the events you just cannot foresee. So it's the combination of events coming together to cause a failure mode that you won't do. Now, interestingly, there is Netflix take a very, very active approach, and they take an anti-fragile approach. The link here is to their blog post where they explain how they use a piece of software called Chaos Monkey. Now, Chaos Monkey, they run on their production environment, and it randomly switches off infrastructure items. Now, this is where I see lots of people saying, on a production environment, you run a piece of software that intentionally breaks the environment. And their logic is quite simple. They want to be around in the office when the infrastructure breaks. They want to understand things that break the infrastructure. So if they're doing it when they're all sat in the office, it's much, much easier to actually then fix and handle and stop the impact spreading. Whereas if a failure occurs at 3 a.m., no one notices, one person gets called into the office, it can have a disastrous impact on the infrastructure. So they actively use this there's a whole suite of these chaos apes, chaos monkeys now, that they use to actually actively switch things off. So think about that in terms of testing. And this also comes in with some of that, one of those other testing ideas of exploratory testing, where it's not a fixed script. People learn how to test things as they move along and go through the approaches. So the message here is very much the same. All these approaches say the similar thing. Many things will change, but the rate of change supported by the business is what service transition is about. And so that is testing and ensuring that everything works before it's released. But from a service management point of view, in terms of moving forward, then lots of things are changing. The tools, the processes, the organization, the culture, the attitudes, and the agility. Unfortunately, there is no quick wins or quick, easy answers to changing processes. So you have to look at your own organizations and sort of say, well, actually, how can I start applying these concepts? Cloud is here. Agile is here. How can I start actually utilizing them and bringing them in? How can I take the DevOps concepts and bring my developers and operations teams together for better service engineering and automate as much as possible? But back to the key point about people being the most thing. The biggest changes in this are the people and the culture. Okay, so some quick reading, or further reading if you want. The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim. That's the great book on, or the original book on DevOps, the one that started it. I said Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, is heavy going, but also a great book on talking about how systems differ between fragile, resilient, and anti-fragile. And then the others are also there. Continuous delivery, about how to actually set up an approach for constantly delivering items out into your environment. And with that, I'll thank you and hand over to Giovanni.